Welcome, viewer, to today's episode of Viewpoint, where we discover perspective and embrace dialogue. The Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives, Honorable Benjamin Kalu, recently made a remark regarding the International Legislative Dialogue for Women. The meeting scheduled for October 28 in Abuja. This dialogue is part of the ongoing constitutional review aimed at increasing women's political participation in Nigeria. As part of this effort, the Constitution Review Committee is working towards achieving the first set of constitutional alteration by December 2025. I'm Olaiton Babatunde, and with me is Odiawa, a seasoned political analyst. Good evening, Odiawa.
How are we?
I'm okay. How are you doing?
Perfectly fine.
All right. We break down the implication and potential impact of this development on women's role in Nigeria political space. Stay with us on the next phase of the show. Thank you for staying tuned. The Nigerian government has been working towards inclusion. In last week's episode, the lawmakers also made a suggestion of Nigerians in the diaspora voting during election. And now the House of Rep wants more women to participate in politics. And just as the popular saying, what a man can do, a woman can do better. Looking at the likes of Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, one can see the reason why the House of Rep wants more women in politics. Odiawa, the International Legislative Dialogue for Women aims to increase political participation for women in Nigeria. How significant do you think this is in shaping the future of Nigerians' political landscape?
Well, to begin, you said something, what a man can do, a woman can do better. I tend to disagree because you're sounding chauvinistic when it comes to women here now.
Okay.
But not to say that the women are not also actively responsible when it comes to politics.
Okay.
There's also need for them to also be involved in politics. Why? Because there's a saying, when you educate a woman, you educate a nation, because only a woman that can give birth.
Yeah.
She gives birth to one child, twins, triplets, quadruplets, name it, and the list is endless. Now, when you educate a woman and she gives birth to this number of children, some give birth to good, bad, and ugly, depending on which actually comes out and becomes something in the society. So we're restricting it down to political participation. Now, politics now doesn't end with those at the legislature, the judiciary, or even the local government or state government. When we talk government, we're also talking about the military here. So women's involvement now, I would say, I think is a step in the right direction on part of the legislature to actually make sure that women are also actively involved. Because when you look at it, government is also likened to a small nuclear niche when it comes to the family.
Yeah.
The men provide. The women actually call the shots in the house. They know when the gas is getting finished. They know when the rice is depleting.
Yeah.
They know when everything is going down. The man's own is, okay, I need to provide fuel for the car. Just basic things that he's actually making use of. But the sacrosanct things which are actually germane to keep the house running, to make sure that, okay, the gear of the house is actually being lubricated. It is the women who are armed with such information. So when you have women who also are able to look at some sites on the sidewalks, let me put it that way, because it's only a woman who, when she's in the kitchen, she can be watching TV and chopping carrots, and she won't slice her finger. A man cannot try that. If not, blood might spice up your food. So when you bring women in government, and they are also looking at all those oversights on the sidewalks, or maybe probably on the service lane, why? Because the man is much more on the express lane, moving faster. The woman will actually draw the man to attention. That is why we need the woman also to bring in this gender. That's where gender equality now comes in, so that at least we can actually be practicing genuine democracy, whereby decision-making functions or policies are actually heeded to. So I think it's a step in the right direction when you bring in such policies to make sure that women are actively involved. If we look at it from the suffragette movement, which started in the UK, the US, and also came down, I think recently, some months back, they did a film on Fela's mom, Funmilayo Ransome Kuti.
Yeah.
You saw how actively she actually brought the women to get involved in policy decision making. Why? Because they were actually being sidelined or marginalized. If we go back to the Aba Women's Riot, also historically speaking, similar thing played out. In the 90s, it had also been evolving, and some evolutions have been taking place. But it has actually become pronounced. Why? Because of availability of the internet, cable TVs now, which were wishes back then, which can now be afforded by even students now. So everybody now is armed to the tooth and being abreast of information. So women also are now more enlightened. They are no longer being locked up in the kitchen. And recent or more protests or demands or requests are actually being like, blocking the ears or causing tantrums in the ears of people who did not want to listen. So with the game changer now, people will have no choice other than to listen. So subsequent generations that are now coming on board now will now see the need for them to actually preserve the interest of women in politics.
All right, with the look of things and what you just said, it seems you're not agreeing to the fact that what a man can do, a woman can do better, can even do more.
I know, but I just defended that also, but also defending my gender too.
All right, but what I'm just trying to say is that women are mostly known as managers, and when it comes to politics, I feel because of the empathy they also have, they would function well when it comes to the welfareism of the people in the country. And one thing Nigerians need at this point in time is for the government to look over their welfare, which is not happening. So I think this development would really help Nigerian governance and all of that, because now with women in politics, it also means that the needs of the people would be well taken care of. That's what I can hope to look forward to. Now, women in politics is not so practiced, which could be because of the men lead stereotypes. Men always want to lead. What do you believe are the major obstacles that have prevented greater women's participation in Nigerian politics?
Well, obstacle-wise, I can only center it on one thing.
Okay.
And it's a cultural thing. And I will call it patriarchal politics, whereby it's always the guy, as you always said, the man, the father. It's not masculine or nothing. Like I said earlier on, that we live or we grew up in an environment or climate where the woman's residency is always in the kitchen. And she has become a baby-making machine at the end of the day, why her second job is to procreate and give birth. But that status quo is now changing, whereby women now need to get really actively involved in decision-making policies. But this patriarchal politics now will continue to linger. Why? Because a mindset needs to be changed. So that seed is not sown into the grandchild from the father, which was actually successfully sown in by the grandfather and great-grandfather. So it becomes a perpetual syndrome where people cannot break from the norm. Why? Because of the cultural setting in which they find themselves. Take, for instance, a father dies and property is to be shared. The women are sidelined, they're secondary. The primary people are actually the men. Even the uncles will come on ground to also receive their fair share as if they're actually shareholders or stakeholders before the women are even thought about. Now, the men are actually even given serious properties, like probably landed properties. If the man has a Rolls Royce of close to millions or tens of millions or billions or a Bentley or a private jet, it goes to the son. So these Bentleys, which I've just mentioned now, is equivalent to your natural resources here, like crude oil, your gold, your columbites, just to mention a few. It actually goes to the men. You will never see, even ministerial positions, they hardly give it to women. You can't compare Minister for Foreign Affairs and Petroleum Resources to Minister of Humanitarian Affairs. Those offices are not child's play offices compared to humanitarian affairs. Minister of Defense.
So are you trying to say a woman cannot undo that office?
I'm still coming to that.
Okay.
I'm still coming to that because I think subsequently we should also look into that also.
Okay.
Not that a woman cannot handle it. I began by talking about a cultural thing.
Yeah.
It starts from the home, where there's a build-up. The father says, okay, I'm connecting you and linking you up with this person. Instead of the daughter, because it's believed or perceived that the daughter at the end of the day will marry off to another person and be answerable to that man's name and not now provide the interest of their own part. The same thing is replicated in politics here. So if a woman comes on board, not that women have not been actively involved. We had the likes of Patricia Ete, a one-time leader of the National Assembly. We saw how she was maltreated, or should I say set up and kicked out of her office from the #1 seat. Why? Because it's a mental thing. You're a Yoruba lady, right?
Yeah.
You hear when a man will say, Obìnrin, no, all this kind of, it's demeaning.
Yeah.
So it's a cultural thing. That's why I started by talking about patriarchal politics. It's in every tribe, even from Edo State where I'm from. It's also in the North. It's prevalent in the North. You can never see a woman lead key positions unless maybe she has really, really passed through the mill to actually be convincing enough. So it starts from a cultural thing, which transcends from the family into the larger scale. And when it transfers to the larger scale, that is where we're now talking about national politics or state politics here. So the psyche you're coming from now will begin to influence the decisions or policies you are making at the national stage or even the state level. And it begins to affect people whom you're not even connected to. That's the whole thing.
Yeah, I think we have to leave the stereotype now. The government needs to leave the stereotype and focus on the abilities of the women and their achievement. Looking at recently...
If we say the government now, it will not be proper to say the government.
All right.
It is those in government.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. But then I think there's need to make sure that women are more empowered to, because looking recently, like I wanted to say, Honorable Kekereekun was chosen as the acting Chief of Justice. And during a recording that I did in the past, there was something about talking about the achievement of Kekereekun, and it was enormous. So I feel the people in government, like you rightly said, should look more into the achievement of the women rather than focusing on the stereotypes of men leads. Now, Nigerian government is known to always have plans, but one problem we have is that they hardly monitor or follow through with their plans. The first set of constitutional alteration is expected by December 2025. Do you think these changes will have a lasting impact on the inclusion of women in governance? We've heard it, they've said it, they want to bring women into government, but then we can't be so sure that after saying it, they're going to make do with it. Do you think this would have impact or a lasting impact on the governance in Nigeria?
Until we emancipate ourselves from political slavery, before that will have a lasting impact. I deliberately mentioned political slavery because if we look at it, we have some people, godfathers or godmothers or one uncle or one auntie who is highly placed politically and will say, okay, my son, you need to be in so-so position in office. It could be the customs, it could be the prisons, army, navy, air force, or even in the legislature, one ministerial appointment or one position as a commissioner in a state. Now, it's a case whereby they remind you, said, how can you make a woman be your boss at the end of the day? Somebody is instigating you or pushing you to instead watch before you leap or leap before you watch. Before you say Jack Robinson, instead of being answerable to the job, you're answerable to people who have selfish intent at the end of the day. And it will cost not only you something at the end of the day, but people at the end of the day at large surrounding you. So women now being on that whole part where you say it will have a lasting impact, it still boils down to it's a patriarchal mindset. If women are actually allowed to function without some interest for some quarters, I think it will be a very clear and reasonable climate for people to actually believe that, okay, the system is actually functioning. Because once the system is not functioning, that is when you now hear, oh, she cannot do this, she cannot do that. Why? Because somebody somewhere is actually playing his cards on the table, playing politics. Politics is all about interest. When you play the cards, it's all about intrigues. If you are not good at a particular game, I'm sorry, you cannot even play it possibly well. Now, when women are actually put in the stage there and for it to actually have a lasting impact, I think policies should actually be put in place. That if, for instance, if a woman has been functioning in acting capacity, filling in a position, she can also make sure that, okay, she can be retained depending on the number of tenures, if that office is actually renewable. That's another thing. Then also, men should also be put in check, making sure that there's no form of bias to make sure that once a woman is in office, you don't become an insubordinate at the end of the day. It's also a two-way thing. A man can be the boss, a woman can be the boss, but here we're zeroing in now on women. Why? Because they are the weaker vessel, but oftentimes they can be emotionally strong. So being emotionally strong, be able to embrace that mantle and make sure you handle a top-level institution such as the government, I think they should be given a chance also.
All right.
Policies should actually be put in place to make sure that they are strong enough.
Okay, I think I agree with you on that. Now, Honorable Kalu mentioned that women who have made major impact across the globe will be part of this dialogue. Are there examples from other countries where constitutional amendment and political reforms significantly boosted women's political involvement?
I started by mentioning the suffragette movement.
Yeah.
If we go down memory lane when the blacks in the US were trying to fight for blacks' emancipation and right to participate actively in politics, that's where we could now hear of the Black Panther. We could also talk about the suffragette movement from the UK and US. I talked about the UK earlier on before mentioning the Black Panther. I mentioned Fumilayo's escapade.
Yeah.
Then we can also now these were activities which were taking place from particularly the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Now, in the 90s, it wasn't easy for, I would say, coming from the 70s, 80s, and even early 90s. It wasn't easy zeroing in down now on Africa. Why? Because we could see Africa was a cool tone region, upsets and overthrows here and there. A woman will not be quick, as at that time, be quick to carry a gun to begin to react. Yeah. Why? Because they were not really exposed to all that, but rather the men were. So if we look at it, I think policies which have been set up now concerning that, bringing a dialogue, will now let us know examples, which I'm about to mention now regarding that. Now, these examples which I'm about to talk about will actually be zeroing in now on Africa, starting with Rwanda. Rwanda now, as we speak now, is at the forefront of women's representation now in Africa, particularly in the legislature by 64%, followed by Mozambique, Sudan, South Africa, Senegal, and Seychelles, just to mention a few. The list is endless. But the U.S., as we speak now, has 20% of women represented in their government. The men more are represented in the Congress. Now, I'm zeroing in talking about the parliamentary representation now. But they actually made sure that there's actually some level of gender equality. Remember in the first phase of the show when you asked the initial question, I talked about governments not being restricted to the judiciary, legislature, and also the executive council. It also boils down to the army, the military. Now, women now are restricted to, or I won't say restricted to, but are given key top positions in the police force, in the military, or some ministerial appointments to make sure that actually they are also equally partaking in activities in government. So nobody is sidelined. Everybody gets equitable share when it comes to partaking in governance.
All right. Now, Honorable Kalu stated that the committees in both chambers are optimistic about achieving the first set of constitutional changes by 2025. And looking at it, 2025 is just in a few months. It is just in few months. We have about 2 months to go. How feasible is this? And do you think with the current political climate, this can be achieved? Because looking at it, they want to start by 2025. They want to start the women inclusion in politics in 2025. But we have 2 months to go. Do you think they would be able to achieve this before 2025?
Well, you asked the question earlier on.
Yeah, about making plans and not following through. Yeah.
If we look at it, frankly speaking, we need to tell ourselves the gospel truth. The year is almost ending. And very, very soon, these honorables or senators will go on recess. And when they go on recess for the festive season, they come back and they try to recap on what actually they started with from the previous year. There are other bills which are actually in place, don't forget that, which also have to pass through first reading, second reading, and other stages before they are passed into law based on assent from the president. So by 2025, I wouldn't say on a pessimistic note or optimistic note, I'm sitting on the fence whether it will actually be actualized. Why? Because of the kind of politics which is actually tilting towards patriarchy here in Nigeria.
All right. I feel like they should have probably shifted this to 2026 or looking at 2027. That would have actually worked because there would have been plans in place before then. But then this 2 months thing, I hardly believe that's going to work. I agree with you on that. Now, beyond women's political participation, the constitutional review is set to involve discussion on local government and the judiciary. How do you think these areas will be impacted and what should Nigerians expect from the final outcome?
To begin with, I would say on a congratulatory note that Nigeria is actually tilting somehow in a step in the right direction because I think this is the second Chief Justice of Nigeria we'll have after the previous female one from the north. Now we have Kekere. So if we see at a senior level in government, women can actually hold key positions, not just Okonjo Iweala, who was also minister, now currently DG of the World Trade Organization. We should also be looking at a system whereby women can also become the Chief of Defense Staff tomorrow, or more optimistically, President of Nigeria, that if they will allow them to contest from the party level also, depending on how convincing the manifesto will be from the woman. We should also look at the local government level. The local government level is a tier or level of government. Not that I'm trying to belittle the local government, but when you look at the local government, the state government, or the federal government, or even the judiciary, the local government is the least, closest to the people. These people who are at the bottom are actually, I will call them the proletariat in politics. You have the proletariat who are the masses, and you have the bourgeoisie who are the elite. Now, these people now who are actually close to at the local government level, it will be very, very dicey, tricky, or even I would say harmful at the same time, because politics at that level is more rough than the one at the top. It's a big boy thing at the senior level, but it's a small boy thing at the local government level, if you agree. So you don't expect women to be actively involved like market women. Well, I don't understand what market women are coming to do in politics at the local government level. It's not going to work out.
Yeah.
So it's going to be men running the show at the local government level. But if peradventure, because of the policies initiated, particularly from Honorable Kalu, that is to see the light of day, fine, no problem.
All right. Now, we've heard this all from Odiawa, and it has been a great discussion on the impact women inclusion we have on Nigerians' political space. Thank you for watching this episode. I'm Olaiton Babatunde, and with me is Odiawa. Thank you for joining on the show. And do not forget to follow us on all our social media platforms at Veegil Media. Also, do well to subscribe for more content on this channel. Thank you for watching.